Well, we do have some breaking news. We've got the Super Bowl coming up on Sunday, Monday, our time in Australia. Now, the big news, though, is that apparently there is a freedom convoy starting up, Canada style, New Zealand style, headed for the Super Bowl. Canberra style. But the Department of Homeland Security, Joe Biden's Department of Homeland Security, is putting a surge of workers and air resources and all sorts of other things on to stop this from happening because, of course, they're finding this threatening. Now, it's pretty interesting to me, Rowan and Rita, that they're worried about American citizens exercising their First Amendment rights to demonstrate against all sorts of things around the coronavirus, and yet they are just happy as Larry to let more than 200,000 illegal immigrants cross the southern border every month. In Washington state in the U.S., officials have decided to exempt the Native American population from, and again, like the worst racists, they're all on the left now because they're now saying that Native Americans won't have to have life jackets in their boats like you would, on waterways here because, wait for it, they have thousands of years of experience dealing with cold water.
What?
I mean, can you imagine? What? Can you imagine if a Republican had said that, somebody on the right had said they'd be run out of town on a rail, and rightly so. The important thing here, though, is that these cost increases are very unevenly distributed. So while they're helping, people with Wall Street portfolios do really, really well, people I spoke to when I was in the U.S., we were there around the same time, all said, the real basic staple stuff, your ground beef, all sorts of things like that, hugely expensive, doubling in price, and yet we have Joe Biden. I think we've got a grab of him. Listen to this grab of Joe Biden and what happens when Lester Holt, a normally friendly reporter at the normally friendly National Biden channel, National Broadcasting Corporation, has to say to him. Have a look at this.
Back in July, you said inflation was going to be temporary. I think a lot of Americans are wondering what your definition of temporary is.
Well, you're being a wise guy with me a little bit, and I understand that's your job. But look, at the time, what happened was let's look at the reasons for the inflation. And the reason for the inflation is the supply chains were cut off, meaning that the products, for example, automobiles, the lack of computer chips to be able to build those automobiles so they could function, they need those computer chips. They were not available. So what happens? With the number of cars that were reduced, the new cars were reduced, it made up at one point 1/3 the cost of inflation because the price of automobiles were up.
So, there we have it. We have Joe Biden, calling the reporter a bit of a wise guy and then talking about chips. Well, there's no chips in furniture, in bacon, in steak, in peanut butter, in pork, in fish. There's no chips in eggs. There's no chips in the last chicken that I roasted. So, this guy doesn't have a clue. So there were 4 by-elections around New South Wales, coming just a few months after Dom Perrottet took over leadership from Gladys Berejiklian. Now, a lot of people in the media are trying to spin this as some huge win for Labor, that, the coalition is in trouble, that this is a big protest vote against Dom Perrottet, a conservative who a lot of the media hates. But the fact of the matter is that Tim James, a solid conservative, won in Warringah, which was Gladys Berejiklian's old seat. He won with a swing against him, but no bigger swing than you normally see in a by-election at an election when the premier has just swapped. In terms of the other seats, well, it's a bit of a mix. Certainly Bega on the South Coast, which was Andrew Constance's old seat, that has gone to Labor, but I think that's a bit of an outlier here. And everybody is trying to spin this as saying that, federally, this means that the government's in trouble, the coalition is on the nose. I think they really need to dive down a bit more deeply into the nose because that's just simply not what any real analysis of this shows. Well, you had not only that, you had the Women's March on Parliament. You've had all sorts of other massive marches on Parliament, and they love every one of those because, of course, they're pushing a left-wing agenda, an anti-Morrison and anti-coalition agenda.
The media have been a disgrace.
This here, Rowan, as long as I've been in this country, there's been nothing more triggering to the left than the sight of an Australian flag carried by a working-class Australian.
Exactly.
And boy, no wonder they're so absolutely triggered.
And what was that
this.
terrible thing he said? I love this country.
Oh, my God! No, it's a horrible colonial face.
Did you pay for any of that?
Yep.
You did?
Yep.
You got a receipt?
Yep.
How come they were chasing you then?
They wanted the basket.
What?
They wanted the basket.
Oh, they wanted the basket.
Yeah.
Okay. Those two guys were chasing you from the store. They said you didn't pay for any of it. Why are you stealing it?
So, James, he didn't get the memo.
He didn't get the memo,
it's
but
colonialism.
But this
and
is also,
sexism.
this not only shows the incredible problem with crime in New York City now under years of socialist mismanagement, it's also opened up a huge fissure on the left because on MSNBC, the great race-baiting clown Al Sharpton said, even this was too much for him and they had to do something to clean up New York. Well, Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's the woman behind the New York Times' 1619 Project, that bonkers program to undermine American history, well, she said, no. This is all about, injustice, and he should be allowed to steal, basically, is what she said. So now you see that this has all gotten so bad that it's even breaking the left apart.
Right.
But Hollywood, Christian, at the heart, is a business. It exists to make movies that people want to see and sell tickets. So what is happening? Because as Rita said, films like that Ghostbusters remake was an absolute flop. How has identity politics come in over the top of the bottom line?
It is fascinating. It's show business, but I've been saying lately, it's show business with an asterisk because they are willing to lose money at times to push an agenda, to forward a message. It's really amazing. And it's happening again and again. There's a phrase being used, get woke, go broke. And you see a lot of sequels and reboots and TV shows that go in this direction and then fail. It's not just one or two. There's a whole dozens of them. But for right now, Hollywood is making enough money here where they could swallow the losses there. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make fiscal sense for sure.